appreciate everybody taking the time today to run through this information. It's going to be super, super useful. The content is for leaders and end users. There's some strategic content for the leaders. Everybody's an end user, and there'll be quite a few takeaways for people as far as helping to better protect yourself. You're going to hear me repeat many of the same things to reinforce the concepts. Hopefully, after a few repetitions, this all going to sink in pretty good. So here we go. All right, in 1996, I started an IT service company. We've grown quite a bit since then, natural growth, some acquisitions and mergers and things like that. We're currently about 75 employees, over 200 small businesses in the Midwest. We focus on small business, anywhere from maybe 5 to 200 users is typically where we're at. And we're a facilitating member of the largest national MSP peer group. So not only do we follow best practices, we also teach other managed service providers best practices. Been married for over 20 years. I've got a couple of young children. Enjoy traveling and camping, especially the RV style, not so much the tent style. And I'm a big Vikings fan. My purpose from this point on, probably till I retire, is going to be to help protect people from cybersecurity threats. I've worn a lot of other hats in the MSP world, and that's really where I'm focusing my time now and where I'm most passionate. We've designed the industry's most comprehensive small business cybersecurity program. We're going to talk about that today to kind of help you understand where your current posture is, where the gaps are, and what we need to do to elevate your security posture. We assist other MSPs to increase their cybersecurity posture and their offerings to help them protect their house and better protect their customers. And I perform frequent speaking engagements of this nature, or oftentimes in front of associations or just larger companies. I only have one slide with statistics, and this is it. So a lot of experts are estimating that about 3 years from now, we're going to be setting about $10.5 trillion per year of illegal money happening because of cybersecurity breaches. So it is a huge issue. It's going to get worse. It's just too easy, unfortunately. You know, back in the old days, people would maybe stick up a shop with a gun, that kind of thing, way too risky. Now this is much more profitable, much lower risk. The organized crime is going towards cybercrime and away from the other types of crime. Hacking is a good paying job. If you're a young, smart person and maybe your morals are questionable, if you go towards the hacking side of things, you're probably going to make more money than the legitimate side. And the legitimate side of cybersecurity actually pays pretty well. So there's a lot of money there. Small businesses and government are at risk. In case you think you're under the radar, you're not. The Pony Mound Institute last year stated that in their estimation, 2 out of every 3 businesses in the US will be a victim of a significant incident in the next 12 months. They're really attacking everybody. And this really started last year. Before last year, as one of the defenders, I thought we had the upper hand. Most of us did. But things have really changed. And what happened was the hacking groups got more organized and they started sharing information with each other, and they've commoditized their tools. They've made it a lot easier to be very highly skilled and attack businesses and people. And so much so that now the amount of hackers kind of exceeds the amount of targets. So for example, if this week, let's say Microsoft publishes a vulnerability, some kind of server vulnerability, the hackers will all start trying to attack that, and they'll try to fight over the resources. So if you might have a server, a hacker gets into that server, 10 other hacking groups might be trying to hack it at the same time, and they kick each other off. It's a feeding frenzy. And they're attacking everybody. They're attacking businesses, nonprofits, schools, churches, government. It doesn't matter who you are. If you have a bank account, they're going to attack you. Billions of dollars each year are sucked out of the US economy, and really bad things are being done with it. They're helping their military engines. The hacking groups are building up, better cybersecurity programs. It's really bad. The old staple for the last 20 years of antivirus, firewall, VPN, and passwords are not enough to protect you. Our government cannot protect you. The additional inFocus protections of web content filtering and security awareness training are no longer enough to protect you because the world has changed. So it's up to you to stop this. You have to make a decision that you want to take cybersecurity seriously and prioritize it. But it's not as hard as you might think. We can really solve these things quickly, especially since we're all small entities. We're pretty nimble. We can improve our cybersecurity posture very quickly. Like I said, small business and government orgs are a target. Part of the problem is the perception is that they're weaker on cybersecurity, but that's actually true. For the most part, small entities do have less of a cybersecurity posture because they don't have the skill set, the budgets, whatever it is, the processes. Being that you work with a managed service provider like a managed IT that has a very strong cybersecurity program, you can actually get to be in a very strong posture, stronger than a lot of enterprise entities, because the enterprise entities have a lot of stuff they need to protect. It's very challenging. It's much easier as a smaller entity. So you came here for some advice. My $1 million advice: unplug. Just unplug the internet. Go back to doing things the way you used to, where you didn't have the internet. You didn't have cell phones. Did everything through postal mail. Back when we were all happier. Back before social media and the interruptions of the cell phone. But if you can't do that, then you're going to have to pay attention for the next hour. For the first time in history, the bad guys are now more powerful than the good guys. And I'm referring to cybersecurity attack and defense skills. Businesses are bringing a knife to a gunfight, and most of them are below the cybersecurity poverty line, which I'll talk about in a minute, and don't even know it, and are at a serious disadvantage compared to those that do know. Those companies that understand that they have a big gap between where they need to be are willing and usually ready to make a plan to address it. Some of you are in regulated industries, whether it's healthcare, finance, education, whatever it is, and there's a little bit of a misconception that if we are compliant, we are secure, our data is secure. But compliance really generally only addresses policies, procedures, training. There's some technical stuff in there, but it doesn't have a lot of that. That's where you need the security side of it, and you put those two together, where you actually deploy technologies for protection and detection. When you put them together, now your data is truly safe. You must do both. All right, the hacker attack chain. We're going to reference this a couple times today. Back in the day, it used to be the hackers would send out a lot of spam to millions of people, and they get a few bites. After a while, people got they could catch those emails pretty easily, and the bad guys weren't being very successful. So now their attacks are very targeted. They're going to target your business. They're going to go to your website, get everything they can off your website that they can learn. They're going to go to the dark web. They're going to learn a lot on the dark web about your entity. There's always stuff on the dark web. There's always been little breaches, a little bit of information leaked. They're going to do other kinds of searches on the internet. Eventually, they're going to determine how to attack and maybe who they're going to attack. They're always going to try to get through your firewall. A firewall could be misconfigured. Maybe it's some other things going on. Maybe traffic's being allowed through to a server that has some kind of insecure settings. So that's one method. But primarily, as most people know, they're going to try to get it through phishing email. They're going to try to get somebody to click a link. And you have to assume at some point it's going to happen. That little breach, somebody's going to click the link, make a mistake, maybe take a phone call. And so right around here under intrusion, we need to detect that right away. Every breach you hear about on the news happened because the victim did not have detection technologies in place. The hacker was able to determine what their capabilities were, spread around the network, elevate their privileges, some kind of admin level, eventually download the data and plant ransomware or whatever their goal was. And so you can't let that happen. We need to be able to detect things right here early in the attack chain. And we'll talk about this more soon. The impacts of a breach, they can be small and they can be large. And again, your goal here is to keep them to be small breaches. At a minimum, it's probably going to be some kind of confidential data loss. They're going to get HR information, staff information, customers, vendors, patients, whatever it is. That's what their target is, and they're going to get that. And if that happens, you're at risk of lawsuits. There's a lot of that going on right now. Entities are being sued for negligence. You can't claim I didn't know better. If confidential data gets breached, you're definitely at high risk. You're definitely at risk of losing revenue. There's bank accounts can be emptied. There's downtime that can cause loss of revenue. There's all kinds of things. And at worst case, the entity might even have to shut down. All right, here's what we're really talking about today. How to prevent a serious breach. everybody's going to have small breaches. We must have a process and a program in place to not allow the small breach to become a big one. And you're going to have to leverage modern cybersecurity to do that. Antivirus, passwords, VPN, firewalls are no longer enough. So today we're going to talk about how you assess and plan for that, how you're going to want to deploy stronger and more modern prevention technologies, how you're going to want to deploy modern detection technologies, because again, every breach you hear about was because they didn't detect it. And then you're going to want to have some kind of continual improvement process. So every year you're moving the needle a little bit, and we're going to dive into this now. There's a concept in the cybersecurity community called zero trust. This concept is trickling down to everybody else. Possibly you've heard of it, but there's three main parts of this. And if you have this mindset when you're thinking about cybersecurity, it helps guide your decisions better. First off, assume breach, meaning assume you're breached now or that you will be breached. If you do that, you're going to make much better decisions on how you want to protect your information. And I could almost ask everybody here right now, how do you know you're not breached right now? Do you have systems in place to detect that? Secondly, only approved devices. You really only want business provided devices connecting to your data, devices that have the business tools on it, the more advanced antivirus, the web content filtering, the threat hunting systems, encryption, all those kind of things. You don't want unapproved devices attaching to your data. And thirdly, verify users. All of us have to go through this on a regular basis, multi-factor authentication. So just because you have a password is not enough to trust you. You must also provide that second thing that's typically tied to your cell phone. So if we think about things from this mindset, it's going to make eventually your decision-making better. All right. Imagine IT follows the most recognized and well-respected framework for cybersecurity in the country. The National Institute of Standards and Technology created the cybersecurity framework. There's 5 pillars to it. At a high level, it's not very complicated, which is why we're able to help translate this down to your entity size. And really, it's very scalable. From a company of 2 people up to 2 million, it doesn't matter. It'll work for either of you. And we're going to go into each one of these 5 pillars in detail today. All right, the first pillar is identify. So it's very important if you're going to start to make a strategy for cybersecurity, you have to know where you're at right now before you know where you're aiming. So it starts with some assessing. Imagine IT, we probably know the security posture of pretty much all of our customers. And so we can assess where you're at. Some of you might be in a regulated industry, or maybe cybersecurity might require a third-party assessment occasionally. And that can be very helpful to really identify the gaps. Once the gaps are identified and documented, then you've got to get them on a roadmap. All right, we've got to have a timeline, get this done, get this done, get this done, get it into the budget. And then once you've kind of hit your early goal, then reassess annually. The hackers are going to keep finding new ways to get in. We have to reassess based upon the new threat landscape each year and fill the new gaps. How businesses mess up identify, which is how most of them unfortunately do that. So typically businesses at this point, let's say they have a wish list of maybe 30 cybersecurity initiatives they want to tackle. They only do 2 to 3 a year for budget reasons, whatever the reason is, maybe just time. But unfortunately, that doesn't move the needle very fast. You think you're making progress, but you addressed 3 issues this year. Well, the hackers just came up with 3 new ways to attack you. So you're never making progress. Because so many companies in the country are so far behind on the cybersecurity race with the bad guys, they need to close that gap very quickly. Sometime in the next year, you need to fill about 80% of your gaps and solve those right now. And then each year after that, tackle 2 to 3 things to keeping that needle moving. If you don't do that, you're going to continue to be behind and continue to be at very high risk. What we suggest is the comprehensive approach. Rather than pecking away 2 to 3 items at a time, you take pretty much everything you see here on this graphic representation of a security posture and turn them green. And I'll show you some examples of what's not green in a second. You need to remediate about 80% of this stuff very quickly. We're not going to go into detail on each item, but there's a lot of stuff here. And then continuous improvement year after year. About 80% of our Minnesota partners are on this kind of program. It took a while to get there. but everybody kind of realized after education that this is just incredibly necessary considering the threat landscape right now. So here's a representation of a typical org. If I'm walking down the street in Garden City or Sterling or Wichita, and I went knocking on the doors of businesses, this is the cybersecurity posture I'm probably going to come across. Give it a score of about 2 out of 10. Anything not green is bad. Everything red is bad. Everything purple is things that cyber insurance is typically now requiring. So again, I go walking down the street, assess a business, they're probably going to have almost all purple and red, not good. The typical Kansas partner for Managed IT has about 2.5 times higher the score, that much more protection, which is great. It's a good start. There's still a long way to go. There's a lot more green here than on the previous chart. The problem is that our Kansas partners, and some of our Minnesota partners for that matter, are well below the cybersecurity poverty line. And that is measured by thought leadership that says that only the top 1% of American businesses can adequately protect their data. The other 99% cannot. So is it realistic to think you can get to the 1%? Tough. I think we can get close. But what we really want to do is we want to make ourselves not an easy target, not low-hanging fruit. Because if you ever have an attacker that gets into your system, they get into one of your computers, and they find it very challenging to spread, to elevate their privileges, to get their goal, they're going to give up. There's so much low-hanging fruit out there. You just don't want to be the low-hanging fruit. They'll move on. They run it like a business. They have quotas and things, and they're going to give up and go get their money elsewhere where it's easier. So again, our goal is not to be a low-hanging fruit, not to be an easy target. Okay, so we had an incident with one of our customers a couple of years ago. So they were not on our managed security program. They had the basic stuff, antivirus, firewall, VPN, and so on. The CEO's mailbox was breached. The attacker stayed in the mailbox for a couple of weeks, unknown, watching what was going on, who they're emailing, who they're communicating with, who they're going to attack, basically. They figured out they were going to attack the bank. They were able to impersonate the CEO, and they tricked the bank into transferring $500,000 out of that account. This company's cyber insurance did not cover it. So that's a pretty rough little thing. And just as simple as the thing as getting a mailbox breach. That's why it's so critical to protect your mailboxes. Had it been on the managed security program, this would have been protected. It never would have happened. All right, the second pillar, we're going to spend a lot of time here, is protect. This is the second out of the 5. And there's some main areas to it. One is really to get multi-factor authentication everywhere you can put it. Email, online accounts, remote access, whatever it is. We need some more advanced email protection. Spam filtering is not enough. And there's some tools and some things that we're going to talk about that can help protect your email better. One is there's additional subscriptions that Microsoft provides if you're a 365 customer that will better protect you. Password management. Password reuse is one of the reasons that small breaches often become big breaches. If Pinterest gets breached and they get your password, what's the hacker going to do? They're going to try your Pinterest password on your Amazon, and your banking, and your medical, and all this other stuff, right? So you don't want to reuse passwords. We're going to go into that in detail later. And then security awareness training. Currently, we're rolling out security awareness training program to all of our Kansas partners. It's kind of a slow process. We're doing about 1 to 2 a week, and we'll get through that, over the next few weeks. Multi-factor authentication. Everybody's pretty familiar with this now. Something you know, like your password, something you have, typically something on your cell phone. Oftentimes it comes in the form of a text message, which is fine. It's a lot better than nothing at all. But a tip for you is wherever you can change that setting, have it go to an authenticator app on your cell phone. So on your cell phone, you would download something like Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator. I prefer Microsoft. And what that does is it ties that second factor to your phone, the phone itself. A hacker could steal your phone number, but they're not going to have your phone. And so the Authenticator app makes it even harder for them to get around the multi-factor authentication. And it's mandated by cyber insurance. Multi-factor authentication is mandated for email, for online data access, for remote access, all those things. A very critical item. All right, last year, July, PC Magazine did a survey, and the question was, do you use the same password for more than one service or site? And a quarter of the users said yes, they use the same password for everything. Well, like I said in the previous example, if they get your password from one site, they can now use for all your other sites. It's a really bad practice. Don't do that anymore. Another quarter of the users said that I use the same password for most things. Well, again, kind of the same problem. So half the users reuse their passwords for multiple sites. So very, very risky. Small breaches become large breaches. Another quarter say, I sometimes use them. All right, well, that's better. And 30% never reuse passwords. Now, I don't know who they surveyed. It might have been cybersecurity experts, because if I interviewed a bunch of people down the street, I'll bet maybe 5% never reuse passwords. I think it's a very small number. Whatever the case, again, password reuse is really bad. We're going to talk about now how you might want to solve that. So first off, there's a misnomer about changing your password often. Unless you're in a regulated industry that requires it, we recommend not changing your password often. Why? Because what people end up doing is they just append a number to the end or do something silly that isn't very helpful. So it's more important to have a very long password. Look at the example here I have at the lower left. That looks tough, right? Nobody's going to remember that. But the hacking tools are so powerful, they can hack that password in minutes. The length of the password is the key. You want to make them long. Like this example I have here in the middle of the screen. Make it a sentence or a passphrase, easy to remember. You can use spaces, use punctuation. You don't want to use the same passphrase for multiple things. They still need to be unique, but the hacking tools can't hack it anymore. So, but how are you going to do things so that you don't reuse them? Ideally, you're going to use a password manager. And at the end of this seminar today, I'm going to give you a homework exercise about a password manager. With a password manager, you're going to have the ability to create very wildly unique passwords using the password generator feature. And therefore, if somebody hacks one of your accounts, they can't hack any of your other accounts because they don't have the password. But you need the password manager to remember all these. One of the benefits is, and I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a password manager, you go to Amazon. All right, Amazon might use a password like this. You click the little button in your browser for the password manager app. It drops down your list of sites. You select Amazon. It opens up Amazon in a new tab, automatically populates the password, logs you in. You don't have to remember anything. It's very fast and easy. Again, nice thing is they're all unique. The only passwords you need to remember is your password manager password. Make that nice and long. Probably your email password, your computer password, not much else. Business email compromise, per the FBI this year, is the largest impact of a financial issue for hacking, more than ransomware. Ransomware is scary. Ransomware is what makes the news. But that example I gave you, that CEO's mailbox getting breached, that is the most impactful thing that's happening. So we have to protect our mailboxes, primarily through multi-factor authentication, but there's other ways. We also want to eliminate some of that bad email coming in. All right, inbound email best practices. First off, your company needs to subscribe to Defender for Office 365 if you're on 365. It is an additional subscription beyond spam filtering that takes any email with an attachment or a link, and it pulls it aside quickly and scans it for malicious content. If deemed safe, it then comes into the recipient. Google Workspace has an equivalent kind of subscription. That's going to block most of the ransomware type stuff that comes in. Never click an unsubscribe link. Frankly, avoid clicking links in general in email unless you really know what it is and trust it. Instead of that, let's say you want to get off with some spam email. If you're in Outlook, just right-click the message, choose junk email, send it to your junk mail folder. It'll be added to your blocked list. You don't have to worry about it in the future. And then once in a while, once every week or two, just go into your junk mail folder and just shift, delete everything in there. Instead of clicking a link, manually go to the website. So if you ever get like LinkedIn invites to network with somebody, I never click that link. I don't trust it. I log into LinkedIn. And then I accept that invite from there. I just want to avoid clicking links as much as possible. Look for indicators of impersonation. We've all gotten pretty good at doing this. If your organization has an external sender banner, if you don't, you should. In other words, something comes in from the outside, there's going to be a banner that flags that for you. And sometimes people wonder, well, this is silly. I already know this is somebody from the outside. But what if you get an email from a coworker and suddenly you see that banner? That would be a big red flag. Why does that say sex? Oh, the email address is different. Yeah, I'm glad that banner was there. And the timing of the topic often is strange, which is usually a big red flag that we've all seen before. If it's a message that you really feel like you want to address, call the sender. Don't reply to the message, because if they're compromised, the hacker is going to get you to reply. So call them if you really need to find out about that message. Phone calls. This is becoming a bigger issue. A lot of the email security protections are getting stronger. The hackers know that, so they're trying to find other ways to get to the user, so they're calling them. First off, most agencies and banks will never call. IRS is never going to call. Your bank's not going to call. They're going to send you stuff via postal mail. Secondly, IT staff is generally not going to call you either unless you initiated it. So if you get a call out of the blue from Imagine IT or somebody claiming to be from IT and you're not expecting the call, be suspicious. Feel free to take their name and then call back Imagine IT and just make sure that it was legitimate, and they'll get you back in touch with that person. And maybe some obvious things, don't answer the phone if you don't recognize the number. It's almost always phishing now. And do not press 1 to get off the do not call list. Once you press that number, they know they got you. You're probably going to get a lot more calls. All right, cell phone best practices. This is a really big one, this first bullet point here. It's much more difficult on your cell phone to determine if an email is legit or not, if there's impersonation going on. So when you look at email on your cell phone, if you're ever in doubt, just wait till you get to a computer and then give that email some more scrutiny. Also, the attackers, again, because emails protection is getting stronger, they're attacking via phishing text messages. So anytime you get a link in a text message, do not click it. I can't think of any legitimate reason you need to click a link, press a link in a text message. Part of the problem is, and if you look at the example here, you can't really even tell what it is. I can't tell if that's a legitimate place or not. So just don't do it. Just call them back. Also, never provide multi-factor authentication codes to a caller. That's how they would get around multi-factor authentication. Here's an example. Somebody from Amazon, maybe they somehow got your password. All right. So they call your cell phone and say, "Hi, I'm calling from Amazon. I see some suspicious activity in your account. You're about to get a text message on your phone. The 6 characters, please, as soon as you get them, please give me those characters and I will solve your problem." Well, you just help them get around the MFA. Never give MFA codes to a caller. Cell phones are now more and more critical than they ever have been. You've got very important business use on the cell phone and personal use. You want to keep the cell phone clean. Don't install a lot of unnecessary apps on it. So we've all potentially heard of supply chain malware. In other words, you have a computer program, another company, maybe that works with that company that makes that program, gets breached. They breach the counties, they breach that software, whatever it is, and then next time you get an update for that computer program, now your computer has malware. So that's supply chain malware. Same thing can happen with cell phone apps. Let's say you use something like a Bitmoji app, and Bitmoji gets breached. Next time your Bitmoji on your phone gets an update, your phone is going to be infected. So try to keep your cell phone as clean as possible. Keep the more fun stuff over on a tablet. That's not as necessary. QR codes, that funny square that you see, you're seeing more popular now. So let's say you're walking down Main Street and you're walking outside a restaurant and you want to see what's on their menu. Sometimes they want to have you scan a QR code now. Or maybe you're trying to park your car and pay for parking somewhere. They want you to scan a QR code. Well, how do you know that somebody hasn't taped a fake QR code over the original one? You can't tell. There's no way to tell. It's not like a website address. So make sure you trust it. Make sure somebody hasn't taped something on top of the real one before you scan a QR code. Otherwise, you do that, your phone can get infected. Remote work, a lot of that more going on in the last few years. I have one, really main thing to really hit on here is really try to avoid using personal computers for work. We don't know as a business what's on it, who uses it, is it protected? As a business, from a standpoint, you really need to keep moving towards the standpoint of we're only going to allow business provided computers to access corporate data. And there's ways you can actually enforce that through technology once you get to that point. And that's going to significantly reduce the attack surface. A lot of the breaches that have been going on since COVID started has been because of personal computer use attaching to corporate data. And we had an incident about a year ago. So we had a clinic, again, was not on our managed security program. They had a VPN. VPNs are secure. They're part of the staple of strong cybersecurity stuff for a long time. However, the VPN did not have multi-factor authentication. A hacker was able to obtain a user's network password. The user's network password was tied to the VPN, same password. So they were eventually able to get into the VPN and download patient data, and then they planted ransomware. So this was a disaster for the clinic. They were down. They couldn't service their patients properly. They had to report this incident to the federal government. There was all kinds of bad things happen. So again, you need a comprehensive approach to your cybersecurity. Some tips, best practices for when you're at home and roaming. So first off, again, I mentioned personal computers used for work. Never let family or friends use a computer that accesses our data, whether it's a computer you own or the company owns. Either way, you just don't know what they're going to do on there, either intentionally or accidentally. Don't do it. At home, you should make a second Wi-Fi network. You should have one for your computers and cell phones and one for all of your IoT devices, your refrigerator, your thermostat, all those kind of things. The one for your IoT devices, you want to make kind of a long, yucky code and then never have to change it because it's kind of painful to change that one. But on your computers and your cell phones, you can change those often. Make that a passphrase. We talked about that sentence, that 15-character sentence. Make that a passphrase. It's going to be very hard to hack. If somebody parks their car outside your house, whatever, it's going to be very hard to hack that long password. When you're roaming, try to use your cell phone hotspot as much as possible. You want to avoid guest Wi-Fi as much as possible. When you get on guest Wi-Fi at a coffee shop or a hotel or even at another business, if there's any malicious people on that network, it's like they're plugging a network cable right into your computer and now they can try to start hacking it. You don't want to do it, and they're going to be snipping your traffic for anything they can get out of it. So again, best case, use your cell phone hotspot. If you can't, I suggest using like a privacy VPN app, like a NordVPN, something like that. There's lots of them out there. A lot of home antivirus products come with a VPN app that you can also put on. Your cell phone, I suggest installing antivirus software. It's probably not as effective as computer antivirus, but it's still helpful. Limit the number of apps. I mentioned that. You put all your unnecessary things on a tablet if you can. If your cell phone is no longer supported by the manufacturer, get a new phone. I had to do that last year. My Samsung phone that I've had for 4 years worked great. No issues. It was fast. Samsung stopped putting security updates out to it. I need my cell phone to be safe. I can't have a breach of my company just because of my cell phone. Had to get a new phone. So again, once they stop supporting it and stop patching it, you need to get a new phone. And again, also avoid guest Wi-Fi on your cell phone. Just use your data plan as much as possible. All right, we're just about done with the protect pillar. That was the long one. The rest of this will go pretty quickly. The hacker got past the antivirus and firewall. Now what? We need to survive it. That's what. We need to have things set up in place so we can survive that initial breach. First off, we need to harden our systems a bit. You need to have everything patched, all the devices configured properly. You need to know what's there. Are there devices on our network that we're not even aware of? We need to make sure that the encryption settings are all set up properly. So that's more of a process. Locking it down. That way, if somebody breaches one of the computers, it'll be very hard for them to spread to the rest of the network. Then we need to have detection systems in place and people watching it. Because again, remember that hacker attack chain. If we don't detect that early on, they're going to get all the way to their goal. And then we must have a response plan, one that's documented. And Imagine IT has a very solid incident response plan that's documented that we've used many times. And that's also occasionally rehearsed. Now, if you're a small entity, you can just rely on us. We've got the response plan. We'll take action when it happens. If you're a larger entity with IT staff or IT department, we probably want to take our template and co-create an incident response plan and then do an annual rehearsal. Now, responding here, when are you responding, right? In the hacker attack chain, do you want to respond right after they get into the network or after the ransomware is planted? So without a strong detection process in place, you're going to be responding after the ransomware. It's going to be too late. All right, third pillar, detect. So there's a number of areas that we need to be detecting for suspicious activity. The network traffic. We need to be monitoring traffic between computers, between devices, traffic going in and out of the firewall. The firewall isn't necessarily watching for this kind of stuff. The firewall is primarily trying to block activity, but it's not really going to block, suspicious activity if the hacker's already inside the network. You're also going to want to have somebody, a team of people, watching what's going on and taking action. This is commonly referred to as managed detection and response. And there's automated methods and there's human-led methods and kind of a combination of the two. At a minimum, you should at least get on some kind of automated system that's going to detect and isolate a computer. So Johnny's computer at the front desk gets compromised. The threat hunting MDR system detects it. It can isolate the computer so it can't spread to the rest of the network. We also need to be monitoring the dark web. Anytime there's any kind of little breach or a big breach, the bad guys are going to eventually use up what they're going to do with it, and they're going to post on the dark web, either for free or for sale to other hacking communities. We need to be notified right away that something is out there so that we can take action and change the password or whatever it is. And then also there's ways to monitor, the Azure, Microsoft Azure systems and Amazon and Google. So this is the scariest story. So it's been 2 or 3 years now. We were onboarding a new customer. So they were a manufacturing company, and our technicians were on site, and we were installing our monitoring software and our antivirus software and so on. And multiple users kept interrupting our people, saying, "We're getting bombarded with these annoying pop-ups. Will you please fix these pop-ups?" So we had to escalate that. Eventually it got to a security analyst, and he determined, oh, this is a keylogger. Every computer on the network has a keylogger virus on it. Every keystroke, every user typed for 4 to 6 months was sent to China, as it turned out. The antivirus in the firewall didn't detect it because there were no threat detection technologies there. And so that was a very serious thing. Intellectual property was taken. Every user's personal and business information was compromised. They had to provide identity theft protection to all their people. We had to wipe a lot of systems. It was a very, very serious incident, primarily because they didn't have a comprehensive cybersecurity program and they had no detection technologies in place. And honestly, we may not have detected it right away had not been for a glitch in the program that the hacker wrote. The pop-ups were because of a glitch in their program. Had that pop-up happened there, it might have taken us longer to detect this stuff going on. All right, we're up to the 4th of the 5 pillars, respond, and I talked about this a few minutes ago. I do want to point out that it's very important that users own up to it if you make a mistake. We're all going to do it. It's going to happen. You're going to click a thing. You're going to take a phone call. Maybe you gave up more information than you wanted. Maybe let the caller into your computer. Whatever it is, just own up to it. Call IT right away. You're a little embarrassed. It's okay. It's a lot less embarrassing than what happened down the road if that little incident turned into a serious incident. So don't be afraid to speak up right away. Again, it's very important to have a well-documented incident response plan. We've got it. And if you're a larger entity, we probably should do an annual rehearsal with you. Kind of make some muscle memory so that when there actually is an incident, people aren't freaking out. All right, the 5th and final pillar is recover. We need to be able to recover from a serious incident, and that's primarily done via sophisticated backup systems and cybersecurity insurance. On the backup side, we need to have full image of all the servers, or whatever the servers that have the data, not just file level backup, but the whole image of what you've got. And you have that type of backup system there. We also need it to be encrypted. It also needs to be sent off site and all those kind of things. When you hear about people paying ransomware in the news, it's probably because the hackers were able to sabotage the backups. How did they do that? Because the backup system was probably tied into the network. So the hacker got the network admin password, and they were able to use that to log into the backup system and delete the backups. It's a very common problem. So they must be very separate or immutable. The backup system must have entirely different login, different password, different multi-factor authentication. So if the hacker gets the network password, they can't get into the backups. We also need to protect Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. It's well documented now, very recently, how they can ransomware Microsoft 365. And so you need a separate backup system. Again, if your Microsoft admin password gets breached, they have the ability to destroy data. So you must have a third-party backup with different credentials, different multi-factor authentication. And you also need to test it. If you have a network that has servers, multiple servers, you should have some kind of annual disaster recovery test where we try to do a full restore to kind of a test environment. Insurance. I was surprised to read last week that per ConnectWise, only 30% of small businesses have cyber insurance. I thought it was probably 80–90% by now. Considering the serious impacts of a breach, how will you recover if there's a lot of downtime, if there's data loss, if there's lawsuits, if there's whatever, right? The cost to pay IT to help remediate that. You need cybersecurity insurance to cover that. However, insurance companies have recently made qualifying much more difficult. The insurance companies have taken a beating the last few years with paying ransomware claims, and they're making it much more difficult. I fill out, 2 to 3 cyber insurance applications each week or renewals, and they're getting very, very challenging. They've gotten smarter, and unless you're enrolled in a comprehensive cybersecurity program, and you turn a lot of those things green that we looked at earlier, you're not going to qualify. They're not going to cover you, or it's going to be really expensive to be covered. So something else happened a couple of weeks ago. Lloyd's of London, who is a leader in the cyber insurance carrier industry, said they would no longer cover nation-state attacks, acts of war types of attacks, if they can somehow prove it. So if that's the case, what's going to happen? It means it's even that more important that you be well protected, so you don't have to get to the point of relying on insurance. We're just about done. This is another graphic representation of the NIST cybersecurity framework. And so we've already talked today about identify. So you have to identify where your current posture is before you make a target, know where you're aiming at. Identify your gaps, get them in a roadmap, get them in the budget, get those things done. What primarily you'll be doing is you're going to deploy modern protection technologies. There's a lot of gaps right now. You're going to deploy modern detection technologies. There's some big gaps right there. You're going to have response, and so we got that pretty well covered. And on the recover side, again, solid backup system, cybersecurity insurance. And then when you're there, you don't just call it good. Again, you're going to want to reassess each year, continue to move that needle. Next year, there's going to be some new threats that we're not aware of right now. We must identify those gaps, get them in the roadmap, get them in the budget, get them protected. A strong cybersecurity posture can be a competitive advantage, depends on your industry. So we have a customer that has a strong posture. One of their competitors had a breach, and our customer was able to pick up a lot of their competitors' clients after that happened. So that was a win for them. On the opposite side of that, we have a customer that was trying to obtain a large enterprise client. Enterprise organizations usually set the bar really high if they're going to do business with you, especially if you're going to somehow be communicating electronically. Think Target, for example. The big Target breach from 7-8 years ago was because of an HVAC vendor that had access to a computer. The HVAC vendor got compromised, somehow allowed the backdoor into the Target network, and then eventually a lot of credit card information was exposed. So in this particular story, this customer of ours was courting an enterprise customer. They had a low cybersecurity posture. They did not get the customer. They learned their lesson. They signed up for a strong, comprehensive program. They now have signed up another large enterprise customer. So there was a silver lining to that. So these are a lot of the gaps that we've identified for our Kansas partners. And I'm just going to kind of talk about these at a high level, but there's a few things here that are very email related. Locking it down so somebody else can't send email with the exact spelling of your domain name. That would make it very hard for the recipient to know it's phishing. Improving the strength of the antivirus software. Having human-led and automated threat hunting going on, and people that have the authority to isolate and remediate things 24 hours a day. Dark web monitoring and so on. So there's a lot of things here that we'd like to do to help turn a lot of those red things green. And how we do that, it's enrolling in something called the Security Shield. So that's what we call our managed security program. The Kansas partners already have some pieces of it. We just need to finish the puzzle, finish the picture. And it starts with a quick reassessment of what your cybersecurity posture is. And at that point, you're going to choose either Essentials or 247. The 247 is more expensive. That's where you have the human-led 24/7. The Essentials is still a really strong program, and it has auto isolation built in for when it detects compromised endpoints. It probably takes about a month. So remember that earlier graph when I showed kind of that shield graphic of a lot of the red for the Kansas partners? It'll only take about a month to turn it mostly green like you see here. That's a big advantage you have over enterprise. Enterprise takes years to make that kind of a change. We're small, we're agile. At our size, we can all do this much more quickly. We have a security operations center of 4 people that I lead. And so we've got people that's dedicated. It's all they do is addressing alerts, training users, doing deployments. There's a lot of things that we're doing. And again, it's designed around that zero trust model. We're going to assume you're all breached. So when I say that, one of the first things we do when deploy Security Shield is we deploy the detection upgrades before the protection ones. We want to know if there's anything going on there before we put more tools on there. And again, hopefully you're only connecting through approved devices, and we verify user access every time. All right. That's the end of our presentation. I know Mary had to jump off, so I'll do the close here. But I've got some homework. I've got 2 kinds of homework. So first off, homework for everybody. Feel free to screen grab this if you want. We're also going to be sending out this slide deck to you. I want everybody to set up a password manager application. Do it at home, do it for work, whatever, do it for both. But you're going to take some time, an hour or 2, and you're going to download some password manager application and install it. You can pay for one or you can get a free one. Once it's set up, you're going to make that real long master password for the password manager. Then you go to each site one at a time. Go to Amazon. Log in your Amazon account. Use your password manager application. Generate a random, unique long password. I'd suggest 15 or more characters. You're going to change your Amazon password. Save it. It's saved in your password manager, so you don't have to remember it. While you're there, you're going to make sure that multi-factor authentication is enabled. Bonus points if you tie it to an authenticator app on your cell phone like Microsoft Authenticator. Do that for all of your online sites. You have just made yourself 90% more secure just by doing that. Now, for the executives on this call in IT leadership, we've got a self-assessment you can take. You can, again, if you screen grab this, you can manually type it to get to that address. Otherwise, you can click the link when we send you the PDF. There's 2 assessments here. One is for executives, one is for like IT staff or IT department. The executive one is more strategy driven. The IT one is more technical in nature. Take them both if you want. Once you do that, then please engage with your Imagine IT business relationship manager. It's going to be James or Andrew. They're both in the call here. And you're going to want to work with them to really make a plan to try to close that gap quickly. We want to get you, hopefully by the end of the year or the end of your next budget cycle, 80% of that diagram here to turn green. It's very important because you're so far behind right now. And then each year, we're going to continually try to move the needle. So that's all I have for you today. I'm going to check the meeting chat to see if there's anything there. If I can find the button for it. Does anybody have questions? And feel free to unmute if you just want to verbalize it. Either way. And I know that was a lot of information. I talked fast. Hopefully it all made sense. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. And again, we'll send out the follow-up information. Have a great day.